Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Milan Sharma Show. I'm your host, Milan, and today my guest is Marin, and she is currently a sophomore student at Eastern University, and she's is a student of the Templeton Honors College as well, majoring in communication with a concentration in journalism. She's also a sports writer. Oh, turn that off. She's also a sports writer for the Waltonion, which is Eastern's newspaper, and she's on the women's golf team, so that definitely goes hand in hand. And she's going to be an event coordinator for Templeton's Student Council, which basically talks about uh, just activities for Templeton Honors College students. And currently, when she's not at Eastern University, she resides 40 minutes from Scranton, PA. And many people don't know where Scranton is. Of course, the Office show is what makes it famous. I personally lived near there for a couple of years of my life, so I am a little familiar. But for you guys watching, that's what it's about there. So, Mary, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Thanks, Milan. Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Absolutely. So, first off, I'd say from what you told me previously, you've been involved with a lot of different types of athletic things in your life, from basketball to soccer, baseball, dance, and there's probably some other intramurals that you haven't included. So I'm just curious. You stated that you've done at least some of those things for almost a decade of your life, which is a pretty long
Mhm.
time, 12 years. And I'm just curious, like, what do you get most out of each individual sport, or if you don't have a lesson from each sport, like how has each craft really shaped you as far as like maybe your personality, maybe your value shifting, friendships, things like that. How is like something like soccer, golf? Obviously, you've done that and you're committed to that in college. So how has that really shaped you? Would you say?
Yeah, anybody who knows me knows that I'm a super well-rounded and involved person. They just kind of know that I'm this personality that gets along with every single group of friends, can do anything that is asked of me, like whether it be like go out to play soccer on the field, go out to play volleyball, go out to the courts to play basketball, just like anything that involves sports. People basically know that they could ask me to do it and I'll say yes, because sports have just been kind of ingrained through my life ever since I was little. And I think playing different sports growing up, it not only allows you to like pick and choose one thing that you really want to focus on, because there aren't a lot of people that could be like multi-sport athletes, and me being like a 5'2" female, there's not a lot that I can really focus on, other than something that like is really just like focused to me, like tailored to me, like my craft. And so like golf worked for me because basketball, I'm short. So even though I could shoot, it's like, where is that really going to take me in college? But along like with the other sports just always kind of came natural to me. It's something that my dad always taught me. The more sports I did, the more I realized how different they were. And playing different sports gives you an appreciation for all of them as a whole, which also kind of just shapes where I want to go as a career path in sports writing. Realizing that different sports have their own unique like niche qualities, and that there is something special to be taken away from each one of them, and then as sports as a whole. So sports are a huge part of my personality, not only because I play them, but because the values you can take away from them are individual and they're different and unique, and human beings are individual and different and unique. So I think that's just tied together in what I believe, and then what people close to me also believe about sports.
Hmm. Yeah, that's you made a lot of good points there. I 100% agree with you regarding how sports uh it's very like the niches in each sport is very unique, because that's what's really fascinating about it, because there's so many sports that you work out really hard, and you're getting the same as far as like exercise benefits, and yet you the skill set is so different. Uh, One thing I can relate to immediately with what you say is how this here. how you I lost my train of thought real quick. One thing I can relate with immediately is I used to do swimming and running for a while, and when I did those two sports, I learned so much about teammates, about how they're so different, like as far as like swimmers and runners, and in a good way. It's not a bad thing, but the lessons I learned from each sport is very different. And so you mentioned about your career path as far as being a sports writer, and I'm curious because this really I wouldn't say like completely shocked me, but it's definitely something I don't see every day almost. Because every time I'm watching ESPN or some sort of sports, it's usually like, and I could say like previously I watched like some videos, like four guys and like one woman there talking about sports. So I'm curious to know. You said your father had well, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, but also, do you have any thoughts on that? I guess I'll just say that right now. I see your
On
reaction.
women in sports in
Yeah,
general.
as far as like sports commentary, sports media, things like that,
Yeah.
writing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely see what you mean, as it's a very, very predominantly male field, like sports in general, and like let alone sports media, like sports broadcasting and such. But it's important to have different voices when you hear things coming from different people. And so if you have three males commentating on a women's ice hockey game, you're not going to get that same perspective as you are with two or three girls commenting on the same game. Because if they are, let's say, like alumni of a women's college hockey team, or they've played for their national team and they know the sport and they know women's hockey in particular, you're going to get so many different perspectives and voices from those three ladies than you would from three guys who maybe have played also in college hockey or in the National Hockey League or have coached. But merely being female connects you to that audience of like the women as a team, and then also your girls out there who are watching because it's a women's ice hockey team, but it kind of it there are some nerves that like go into choosing my career, because I know it's a male dominated field, and it worries me that I might not get selected for a certain position, or I might not get a raise if it gets even to that point, because there are men that are being looked at and maybe chosen more in particular to like the sport that they've played their whole lives. Like if I go to get a job at like NBC Sports Philly and I want to commentate for the Flyers, or I want to like sit on the bench panel as they're analyzing the game afterward, are they going to choose me, who has just like written sports articles and has gotten experience through that, or are they going to choose a guy who's been on the Flyers for 12 years and just retired and is like, hey, I'm going to go
Right.
commentate now? So there is a little anxiety going into my field, but with all of that said, the passion that I have for sports and the knowledge that other people have told me that they notice that I have about sports, it makes me a little more confident, because I can sit at home and watch the TV and be like, Sidney Crosby's not scoring goals, but he's passing the puck well. And the guys will sit and commentate and be like, Sidney Crosby's not scoring goals, and end it at that. So I pick up on things that I notice that I and that other women in sports can do just as well or even better than some men. So, I mean, all voices are important, don't get me wrong, but I think diversity is the name of the game if you want to reach your whole audience.
Yeah, very well said. It's funny you said earlier about I I think it makes a lot of sense how you said that. I believe it was something where women that are commentating about an ice hockey game, like if they're alumni of that team, that they would obviously have more insight, maybe a different perspective. Well, probably a very different perspective than someone from looking from the outside in. And that makes so much sense, because I've seen how if I'm on the track team or the swim team, the men's team and the women's team, they are cohesively very different as far as how they communicate with each other, how they vibe with each other, how they solve issues. Like I've noticed that guys, at least from runners, from a running perspective, they really more so deal with issues in a very overt way. Like they just either, if it's very tense, they'll yell, be like, and they deal with it right then and there. But next thing I know, I'll see some women, they're like smiling and stuff. And then I hear that they're going to the coach's office once it, they're just basically trying to mediate that issue for a lot longer period, which I never heard about. So I think it's really important to have that perspective in the media. And I think at least as far as, I don't know how great the strides have been, but at least I've noticed, I know this, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but when I was watching the NBA finals, I noticed that there was definitely a woman that was commentating with a man, but I'm not sure. It's like an older lady, but I can't think of her name.
Yeah, I can't think of her name right now either, but I
Yeah.
definitely know who you're talking about.
Uh-huh.
She's on TNT a lot,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
next to the court rather than
Hmm.
like in the panel with like Charles Barkley and
Hmm.
and like Magic Johnson and Shaq. They're all like on the panel, but then down at the court you have this lady who probably played in college, probably maybe even coached a little bit. So she's just as qualified as these other guys. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Hmm.
Cannot think of her name though.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's
Yeah,
gonna kill me
because
now.
yeah, yeah. And I like how you were saying about, at least, of course, it's more anxious anxiety going to a field like that, especially with not, it's kind of unknown in certain aspects. Obviously, who knows what happens after you graduate,
Yeah.
Um, um, but I I like how you want to keep working. I like that you're putting in the work, at least, because I've noticed that when people are passionate about something, if you're working hard toward it, at least like you're at least writing for the Waltonion and being like last year as a freshman, which I think that's a great thing to be involved on campus with too. It's awesome. Um, but yeah, you said that your father really got you into sports like that. I'm curious, how because I'm sure he has really influenced you with your love of sports. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but how has he or maybe some other figures in your life directed you toward your passion of sports and eventually sports commentary or writing or anything like that?
No, you're absolutely right. My dad was probably the biggest influence in my life, at least growing up and playing sports. He'd always have me out in the backyard with like a wiffle ball and a plastic bat, and we'd be like throwing pitches and swinging at them. He'll have me in the backyard with those little like plastic golf club sets with the little plastic golf balls that you just whack around and they go like 2 feet.
Mm-hmm.
But ever since I started that at like 4 or 5 years old, then in the driveway and the basketball hoop, in the front yard with the soccer ball, like literally it could be anything for him to get us outside and play a sport, because that's how he grew up. He grew up playing sports. He grew up playing football at the Freeland Public Park. He grew up playing baseball there. There's actually this really funny quote that I forget, one of my dad's friends from his hometown. He used to tell him that my dad was really good at everything, but not great at any one particular thing. And I think I've taken that legacy on because I could, like I said earlier, I can literally be asked to go play a pickup game of any sport and do it and be like okay at it because I'm just a naturally like athletic minded person. But I would never be that great to go on and play that specific sport like for the rest of my life.
Hmm.
But my dad always tells me that he thinks that I broke that curse because now of golf. And he'll always just tell
Hmm.
me that I'm the best like mental minded golfer, have the best swing and the best technique. And I'm like, Dad, like I don't know,
Nice.
okay? Like I'm not shooting even par. Like I'm not on the tour yet. I don't know if I'll ever even be on the tour. Um,
Mhm.
I just I owe a lot of what I do now to him and to the rest of my family, honestly, for pushing me in all of those sports that I did and coming to all my games, coming to all my matches, and all my dance recitals. Because those 3-hour ones are not easy to sit through. But I owe a lot of that to them and to my dad specifically, and his passion for sports as well. And I think you mentioned about like writing and commentating as well. We actually, it was like halfway through my junior year of high school, and we were like sitting down watching a hockey game, and I was, talking at the TV as I do, telling the players what they should be doing as if I'm their coach. And a lot of the times this happens to me and my dad. We'll say something like to one another and talking about the game, and the commentator will immediately say exactly what we said right after we say it. And so we always laugh about that. But then in that moment, my mom was like, Marin, like, why don't you just go into sports writing? Like, why don't you just do it? Because I think at that time I wanted to be a major in psychology and do like forensic psychology. And I mean, I don't know where that came from. It was probably like a criminal minds phase I had.
I was about to guess that, to be honest.
Yeah, like me watching too many episodes of Criminal Minds and just not knowing what to do in college. But ever since my mom said that to me, I just took it to heart and was like, like I would really love to do that for the rest of my life. And it just kind of stuck. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I would say that's really cool how your mother and father really kind of cultivated that passion in you. I'm just curious as far as, because that's all about like talking and writing about sports. I'm curious what really shaped you, or not shaped you, but really drove you to do golf in college, because it's crazy. Like I think something like only like 7% of athletes actually do a sport after high school, which is really like crazy, because I remember learning about that. All division, like from division 1, 2, and 3. So all that combined, it's only like 7%. So I'm just curious, really, what made you really say like, yeah, I want to commit to this as well as academic studies as too?
Yeah. So my freshman year of high school, that's when I started like competitively playing golf. Like I had swung a club ever since I was 7 years old and just played in like little recreational leagues and stuff. But I only really played competitively, like, or started my freshman year of high school. And our current high school coach at that time was like hyping up women's golf in college and being like, oh, you can get so many scholarships for it. There's so many opportunities for women's golf. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Like that sounds fun. It sounds fun to play like 4 more years after your 4 years of high school. Like, why not? But it wasn't really like a thought in my head at that time because I was only a freshman in high school. You're not really like thinking that far ahead in your future. But I just kept playing through high school and I loved it. And I fell in love with playing the sport and I improved and I enjoyed playing. That eventually, when I was starting to search for colleges, I was filtering in like, okay, what schools have good golf programs? What schools do I think I could play for? And so unfortunately, Division III schools don't offer athletic scholarships, as you know. So that was kind of a bummer when picking a D3 school or like looking at D3 schools, because I did want a smaller school and I wanted a school where I wouldn't be just a number in a huge classroom or lecture hall. Like that's just like the kind of person that I am, just to be more personal and more small school. And so a lot of those schools were D3. And so like I knew going into it that like I wouldn't get money for my sport. And then as I started playing and started practicing with the team, I was thinking like, I don't know if I want money for my sport. Like being a D3 athlete is something of like a different caliber, like you get nothing coming into it. You got your love for your sport and you got the grit of your sport and the mental and physical toll that takes. And you're going in and you're just giving it your all, playing for a championship, running for a championship. Like, what's on the line as soon as you step on the field or on the course or on the court. Like, what's on the line, but you're not getting money out of it. And so being a D3 athlete, like the heart is there. Like it's there more than almost any other college athlete. And so when I had that realization, even going into my freshman year of college, I was like, this is something that I want to keep doing because it keeps my heart strong, it keeps my head strong. Physically, yeah, you got to be conditioned for golf, so I guess it keeps me physically strong as well, but it's involved, like you get involved and you really know the passion you have for your sport once you realize that you can't get monetary benefit from it, you know? And then like the whole thing with the I don't know if you've heard about it, but the D1 athletes now being able to get paid through like
Mhm.
endorsements and stuff, that
Right.
just kind of blows my mind because like are these athletes really going to keep playing for like the love that they have for their sport or for their team, or are they just doing it for money now because they already get free school? Like we still have to pay for school. So,
Right. Right.
and
Yeah,
we don't even
that's
get the scholarships for that, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, and that's a great point because I was even thinking, even if we, let's say we had a vote on you know, Division 3, even like changing that policy completely, I would actually like more so now if it was more scholarship based as far as like reducing tuition, maybe I'd, you know, be more leaning toward that, obviously. But
Yeah.
as far as like endorsements and things like that, I would probably be against huge monetary gains like that, just because I feel like, and you can tell me if you agree or not, but I feel like I don't commit as much time to the sport as I should to get that, you know, to get that endorsement, because when you're studying and things like that, like you're not always working out and being the best you can be. So I would argue that I, you know, personally, I wouldn't really feel like I really deserve that, in my opinion. Um,
No,
but
I
yeah.
agree. I agree with what you're
Mhm.
saying. And I get where you're coming through with like the time commitment because D1 athletes, like, you know, the term for us is like student athlete. The term is like athlete student. So they're
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a part-time and maybe like less than part-time student, which I mean, I don't even know how they get through their schooling because a lot of them just turn professional anyway. But the
Mhm.
time commitment definitely is a huge variable in in not only success but like publicity as well because like all of those teams, like you look at Penn State, Notre Dame, Villanova, Duke, like all of those schools, they sell tickets for their games and they profit so much off of the
Mm,
ticket sales and the merch sales and all of the like you can even call it celebrity endorsements now because they're college athletes
pretty
like on
much.
TV.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like the fact that it's that publicized and it's that popular kind of makes me understand why there would be more money involved, but you take away the purity of the sport. You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
Like you take away the heart that's at the middle of all sports when you do that to like kids, like literally kids. And it just yeah, like I agree with you. I think if someone asked me, "Hey, would you want to get paid for playing college golf?" I'd be like, "No.
mm.
That's for when I put in the time that is completely dedicated to my sport and maybe turn pro. That's when I would maybe want the money for it."
Right. And the exact point you make reminds me of one book I've been reading. It's called Born to Run, and it's a national bestseller. And my dad got me this for a gift, like my birthday way back. And it's very fascinating because these the book is basically talking about a tribe like in Mexico, I believe, and they run like the race is like it's like ultra marathon, so it's like 70-mile races, 100-mile races. And
Jeez.
the one guy, yeah, makes my 8K sound not sound that bad, but I think about my 5-mile race. Um, but it's crazy because the one guy there, and I was asking my first of all, I was asking my dad, is this nonfiction or not? And he kept saying it's nonfiction. I almost couldn't believe it because the guy went there and he's a I believe he was a coach or some sort of like, I don't know if he was a doctor, but he had a lot of credentials. He was fascinated by them because it was called a Tarahumara tribe. And pretty much they would run so much and they wouldn't get hurt at all. They would just keep running and they wouldn't get hurt. And basically the solution he realized, and it was against his, scientific kind of analysis, and he couldn't believe it, but he basically said they didn't get anything from the sport at all. That they didn't like other people have got endorsements, money, medals for winning that 100-mile race. They got no medals, they got nothing, like not even anything. And I really blew my mind. I was like, wow. And then they just love the sport. They love the grind as much as the term is. So that just really blew my mind when I saw that. And I was like, wow. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's just
that's
something I had to say.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the beauty of sports, when you find people who are so dedicated to something that could even give them like pain regardless, or like instead of satisfaction, like the pain for them and the grind for them is the satisfaction. Like that's what
Mm,
it sounds like you're talking about with
mhm.
that tribe, and like them being one with their land for 100 miles. Like that's what they get out of it, and
Right.
that's an incredible story. That sounds really,
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. And I'm sure whenever you have practice, I'm sure you've had times where you didn't feel like doing a certain exercise or drill. I'm not sure exactly what they do in golf, but I guess a certain type of practice, you probably don't feel like doing all the time. But then after you do
Yeah.
it, at least for me, after you do it, it's like, wow, like I feel a lot better. So
Yeah.
um,
No, I can definitely relate to that. When my coach wants me to hit 150 balls at the range and I don't want to hit the same club 150 times in a row, then I'm like, can I switch to my 6 iron and not my driver anymore?
mm,
But I mean, I get that, but in reality, it's the repetition, it's the muscle memory that if you have that ingrained in your mind and in your body, like that's what's going to bring you the success. Because when you're in a controlled environment like that at practice, and I'm sure you know this too, because practicing and running in a controlled setting is so much different than being in a race, I'm sure.
mm, mm,
And it's the same way with golf. Like if you're in a controlled setting at the practice green, on the putting green, or at the range, like you're not on different courses. Like that's the thing about golf. You could play one course one day and another course the next day, and they'll be two completely different courses, two
mhm.
completely different mindsets. It could pour the night before a tournament. So even if you had practiced on that course, the greens will not be the same as they were the day before. So just practicing in a controlled environment, it's a different sensation than competing, but the grind of like getting each shot down to what you want it to be, into that like perfection of hitting the ball in the face of the club exactly where you need it to be, it kind of takes that mindset away from you when you're in competition, that like, okay, I know I'm on a course right now, but I'm going to be zoned in, and it's going to be like I'm hitting those 150 balls on the range. So that controlled environment transitions, like repetition, that grind transitions to competition, just mentally even. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot of great points you made. And especially I can't relate to hitting 150 balls, but um I could say definitely to some workouts that I've done. Uh, I remember after my sophomore, obviously last year we didn't have a season, at least cross country season, my junior year. So like your freshman year, but
Mm.
my sophomore year, I put in a lot of work in the summer, and then the summer or the cross country championship comes, and every meet I'm like PRing, and then I PR in that meet, and it was amazing. And I thought to myself after I finished the race, I'm like, wow, like I would definitely not take a day back like that. I didn't feel like doing, like when I finished that race and I finished with a good mark, I was
Yeah.
like, man, like that's like I definitely would do exactly what I did again, like over again. So yeah, um, it's just amazing to think about that sometimes.
Yeah. You wouldn't take a day back for granted because you know it paid off.
Right, right. Yeah. So I guess going along with athletics, you you mentioned in your so obviously you wrote several Waltonian articles, and the one article that I read on how like basically your experience of being a Christian athlete, um, or even like it was probably your experience of being a Christian athlete, And you're saying how humble confidence lessens the prideful complex that athletes may have, which I thought was a really powerful statement there. I'll read that again to be more clear. Like, so being a Christian athlete humbles your confidence, or brings forth a humble confidence and lessens the prideful complex that athletes may have. And I'm sure I've definitely been guilty of being prideful. I'm sure every athlete, if they're being honest with themselves, have because even I've noticed, like, if I've seen it throughout my teammates too. If someone does much better than them, they have a bad day. Like, if you're very prideful, like, you become envious and jealous of how they do, how they're doing, and that you're not doing, and it's just a mental loop. Like, oh, why is he doing better than me? And it's a losing ground. So you have to just learn to cheer for each other, and that's the best thing to do. So I'm just curious, like, as far as your faith in being a I believe I didn't write this down, but is it uh, something Orthodox, right? Is it Greek Orthodox? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
Greek Orthodox is like the technical, like Orthodox Orthodoxy is the, like, I guess you would call it a denomination because it like split off into however many denominations there are now. But like a specific region, I guess, of Orthodoxy. Technically, my church is a Greek Orthodox church.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, you stated that your faith has been a turning point in your athletic mindset. So I'm just curious. You didn't seem to go into too much detail about that exactly. So I'm just curious, how has it really been a turning point for you as far as your athletic performance, maybe how you perform, or your mental state? Because you even said your maybe your father's a little biased, but even you said that your father praises you with your mental stability. So I'm just curious how that was really a turning point for you.
Yeah, so there was, I think I read something one time. I don't know if it was in a devotional or if I listened to it in a podcast or something. I heard it or read it somewhere, was that everything you do, and I know it's like directly related to a specific verse, and I can't think of the verse right now. Um, that everything you do, like, you owe to God because He gives you that strength and that ability to do whatever you need to do. Like, your gifts are God given. So ever since I heard that and then just kind of like took that to heart, um, if I was struggling with something on the golf course, like if I had a stretch of like 7 or 8 just terrible holes of golf and I was just completely out of it mentally, I was completely out of it physically, could not make a putt to save my life. I I was like, okay, God is giving me what He needs to give me right now, and I can do this because of Him. So having that in my head um, mentally calms me, because who is more present in your life than God Himself? And when you think about that, like when you step back, and even when you're like in your competition and you step back and you think, like, God is here, like, with me. Like, my coach isn't with me right now. I don't need my coach. Who is the one person that is like always going to be there within my game and within my shot and my swing? Who is going to be there for me? And I'm like, it's God. Like, his power and His knowledge and His ability and His presence and His love and His grace is always with me whenever I'm struggling and whenever I am succeeding. So not only remembering God in my struggles, but also my times of success is really helpful, because that mindset of like, okay, I did it once. God helped me get through it once. I'm going to get through these bad holes again because He is always there. So just going into competition and even keeping that mindset throughout competition proper in a faithful Christian's mindset. And like what I said with that quote, like about humble confidence, like there is such thing as confidence. Like you can have confidence, and you can have humble confidence, because you can know your own strengths, but being the humble part of it is knowing that your own strengths are because of God and because he has put you on this planet to do your purpose and to live your life and love him and love others and pursue your passions for his glory. And so that's where the humility, I think, comes in for me. But it's still okay to be confident and know that you can do this because you put the grind in and you put the work in, that it's only appropriate now that this comes out in success and competition. But like being prideful is, I mean, like you said before, something that all athletes could succumb to, because there are these moments of like intense victory where you're just like, I did it, this was me, like I won this, especially in an individual sport like you and your cross country and track with like running individually, like that's you running, like unless you're doing a relay, no one
Right.
else is like behind you, like it's just your body and you're moving and it's your mindset. And especially in golf too, with like the individual competition, like even though you can put in a team score, like your scores combined with your other teammates scores to be like put in a team competition, you're still the one playing for yourself. Like you're not hitting your teammate shots, you're hitting your own shots, keeping your own score. So especially in individual sports, I think it's super easy to become prideful because like especially when you win something, because you know it was just you, like you didn't have your teammates to kind of lift you up and move you, like it was purely you. And so then that's where I think that humble confidence comes in, and like keeping God in the back of your mind, because he's always there and he's always going to give you that ability, give you that strength, and no matter what we say, we owe the glory to him. So
Yeah, and I'm sure, and and for me, there's been times where like things are really tough, and you're like, man, like you think about not doing it anymore, but then again, I think to myself, like God's just blessed me too much to not continue it, and then then there's a milestone that I push forth through another goal that I make, and I'm like, all right, I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Um, and yes, you said you had to be confident to do the sport. Trust me, if you're doing collegiate sports, you have to have some confidence in the field or where in the golf course or the track or anywhere, because I remember my freshman year. I'll just say a quick story here. My freshman year, uh, so like I've been blessed in high school. Like I'm pretty talented, so I didn't have to really worry about the starts or like people near me or around me. But like usually people were pretty decent on the track. There wasn't any like contact, but in the collegiate level, especially, even like I definitely underestimated like the Division III competitiveness, because at least in the Middle Atlantic Conference, uh, because there's just so much elbowing, and I was getting pushed, and I was like, and even
oh
like my
man.
teammates are telling me like, no, you gotta like elbow. I was like, wow, like yeah, in high school I never did this, so I learned very quickly you had to be like confident and just kind of assert yourself. So um, yeah, that's definitely I just want to say that to be clear. But yeah, that's a good point. And let's see. Yeah, the one thing you stated is you say you like reading books. So I'm just curious, what I guess I just anywhere you want to go with that. Is it more so fiction, nonfiction, something that really helped you in life? Um, like anything like that?
Yeah. I went through a phase of time where I was reading a lot of like memoirs of like my favorite athletes. Like I literally bought Tom Brady's TB12 method book that was like this tall and like that thick for
Wow.
like $40, because I was just like, what is in this guy's head that he just wins all the time? And I mean, I went out of the way to buy that book. And then I think I read maybe half of it and I was like, oh, okay, I see. But and then I think I also at the same time bought there's a old hockey player. He doesn't play anymore. He might be in his 70s now. His name's Bobby Orr. He played for the Bruins his whole career. I read his autobiography. I am not currently reading, but started reading another hockey legend, Gordie Howe. His autobiography is, well, not his autobiography. I think it was just a memoir. But there was like a phase of time where I was like just reading those books, and I was like, I want to know what's in these people's heads. But I do enjoy a lot of fiction. It just kind of depends on the book. Like, there's not a specific genre that I like to read. But if I'll like read the back of the book and I'll be like, oh, like this sounds good. I might just like take it home and read it. I'm a sucker for the classics. My favorite book is Treasure Island. So there's a lot of the classics like ingrained with me. Jane Austen, I just read Emma. Maybe, I think I finished it when I got home from school this year in May, and loved that. But reading has always been just something that I've done to pass the time and just for leisure, because it's fun to get swept away in a world that isn't your own sometimes for a little bit and just kind of escape and relax.
Yeah, and or being in someone's own mind, like you said about like Tom Brady, something like that. I can. It's funny you said that. I wasn't really. I myself look more into like nonfiction books, and I read some fiction books when I was younger. But I bet maybe like a year ago, I read a book called Quiet Strength, and it's from Tony Dungy, who's a Hall of Fame coach, or one, I mean, not Hall of Fame, but he's a pretty good coach at least. And it really emphasized the point of how critical developing a team culture on a new team is to being successful and winning. Something that's not connected to really necessarily lifting or practicing technique, but it's more so actually the mentality of team bonding, team culture, how everyone is together on some issue. And there's one point in the book that really stuck out to me, and it kind of reminded me of what we were saying about playing for something bigger than a medal. And he stated how his first year on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, when he was there, he he got the team culture, and they finished with the same record. And the team and his and the players playing under him just threw Gatorade on him in the last game of the year, because they finished 6-9 both years. But there was just a lot more positivity, much more like they all knew what their job was in the locker room, and that just really blew my mind how that could really happen like that. So
that's really important, and that's good to know, because this year Eastern's actually going to have like a women's golf team. So like there were only 3 of us last year, but you can't like qualify as a team score if you only have 3 players. You need, I think, at least 4 is like the minimum number of scores that you need to like count as a team score in competition. But we're going to have 5 girls this year, and 2 of them are freshmen. So it'll be interesting to like come back into like a team mindset after playing a fall season completely individually. So that's good to know about, just like how to keep team chemistry and how to like introduce new people to the program and work now as a team as well as individually. So that would be helpful to keep in mind. I have to read that.
Yeah, my aunt got it for me for my birthday, and I was like, wow, this is like, I read it while I was during, I think, last summer. I was just, because I do lifeguarding in the summer, so when there's no one there, I just like read that book. And I was I was really impressed with the lessons in the book. Like, I'm sure a player would be really cool too, like Tom Brady, someone like as successful as he is. But just that journey from like almost being like nothing, from like an assistant coach to just like a Super Bowl champion is very fascinating to read about. Yeah, and so another thing you mentioned was how you're interested in ancient thinking. So I'm curious, is there anything you read specifically about ancient thinking? Because it's such a broad I have some things,
so
but like
broad, right?
so broad. But do you have any favorite figures or anything, any philosophy, any certain thing that really sticks to you, or is it more so kind of a casual hobby of yours?
Yeah, so like I mentioned in talking to you earlier about how I never really had experience with like a classical education before I joined the honors college for Templeton. So a lot of that was like really, really new for me. And a lot of the ancient thinking and like the ideas and the philosophies and stuff was like super new to me as I came and got involved with the honors college curriculum. So just it, I think part of it is just it being new and exciting is like fun for me because it's something that I was never previously exposed to that like challenges me a little bit. And it's almost honestly convicting sometimes because it tests your intelligence and it tests that your intellectual mind. So I kind of like being challenged because it's not something that I'm super familiar with. But I've learned a lot just being a first year in Templeton, and I've read a lot of things that I've never read before, and I've had to think about a lot of things that I've never had to think about before. And it's interesting when you're put in that situation that for once in a conversation, I didn't know what to say. And I was just kind of dumbfounded and like, where do I go from here? Like I don't have words for this. So that part of it is fun. As for like favorite figures, there's like a running joke that because like part of my heritage is Italian, I'm like obsessed with Dante and Virgil. So I'd have to say that Dante is my favorite figure. But no, I did like the Divine Comedy a lot. As controversial as it is, I did enjoy reading it, and I enjoyed the translation specifically that Dr. Reimer had us read, because I think so. Obviously, you have read it before, and it was probably the same translation as you guys have read. It was like the Penguin Classics.
No, I'm actually not in THC, so I have not read it.
Oh wait, you're not? Oh my
I'm not.
gosh, I literally thought you were. My word.
I know. No,
Anyways.
it's easy to think that because I know you probably see me hang out with certain
Yeah, you're like
people.
always hanging
Right,
around us and like
right.
Geo and
Yep,
yeah, I was like,
yep.
you have shocked me. That has shocked me.
Yeah,
um,
yeah. We continue though.
but I think it's like closest to the Italian in terms of like the poetic feel of it. Like the translator picked words to like rhyme within how it's written because like the whole thing is like a huge poem and it's written in canticles that have like tercets. So like stanzas of three. And in the Italian, it like rhymes beautifully and it flows beautifully. And I wish I knew Italian just so I
Hmm.
could read it that way. But the translator did a really good job of like making those ideas flow, but still having it like not only the ideas flow, but the words themselves and the language that's themselves. Um, so that was really cool to just be more familiar with and read stuff that is controversial, because
Hmm.
a lot of the ancient thinking doesn't like transfer over to modern day thinking. And I think it's almost mostly all of the ancient thinking doesn't translate over to modern day thinking. Um, but it's fun to see where our roots came from, like in that manner of thinking. Like I can't think of anything specific right now because it's the summer and my brain is kind of like turned off to
That's okay. There's
philosophy
no worries, no
right
worries. I'm not here to test you. That's all good.
now.
That's all good. But yeah, that's I have to definitely at least research that a little bit. That's really interesting because that kind of reminds me of I've been following one person and he's kind of been putting giving or kind of giving his viewers like some ideas as far as some philosophers' ideas in their books and how it kind of relates to today, which is so fascinating, like how history repeats itself
Hmm.
and things like that. And like for example, I didn't watch this one thing, but he said like how would Nietzsche respond to this current climate in history, and what his response would be, and it's really interesting. But
Yeah.
one thing what he was talking about, and I said this in an Instagram reel recently that I thought was interesting, was a Russian philosopher. His name is Dostoevsky, and he was talking about how basically it's so simple but like profound at the same time. He was basically saying how human existence isn't it shouldn't be limited to merely living, merely existing, like just breathing, but like living for something. So for me, it really just highlighted a lot of things, like kind of made me question like what am I living for right now? Am I making the most of my time? Things like that. So I'm just curious, like I'm just gonna have some fun with this. Like, what do you believe you're really living for, like in your life? Do you feel like you're merely existing? Are there times that you're really like living for something? I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on
We're
that.
getting deep.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting deep. I actually did watch that Instagram reel, and that had me
Right.
thinking. It made me think of a quote that I heard, and it was probably inspired by Dostoevsky. That I can't remember where I heard it, but it was like, "Are you just living, or are you merely alive, or are you really living?" Or something along the lines of that. Because like life and being alive can have a completely different meaning than like living for something. Like what you're saying is like, oh, what are we living for? Like, what are we striving toward? That can literally be different than just like living to live, because you're put on this earth and you have organs that help you breathe and things that get you through each day, you know? So that's interesting. And it's an interesting concept to think about, because when you look at the big picture, especially like being a Christian, you read through Genesis and you read through the rest of the Old Testament, and you're like, whoa, God kind of is mean. And you have this in your head that, like, why would he create this race to just merely punish them? But then you get to the New Testament and you see how this fallen race is reborn and revitalized and saved from the fall of their sin, you know? So I think in looking at it in terms of Christianity, the mere fact that God came to earth as one of us, as a human being, to save us from our sins and to conquer death and to make us have a perfect life with him in the end, that is the thing that we're living for, because God, being all knowing and all present all the time, um, created us for that reason. Like, he knew that was going to happen. So there has to be reason for why he put the human race through all that he put them through until Christ came. And I still think that reigns true today, because God is putting us through all of what he is putting us through: pandemics, past wars, political issues, division in our country, division in the world, division in other countries, even division in families, if we're going that close, and even closer, divisions in oneself. Like, he's putting us through all of this to make us live, I think, because if we know that we're struggling, but we know that we are here for a reason, that's going to push us past just merely breathing and living for the purpose and the glory of what God wants us to be. And I mean, I don't know if you've had any conversations with Mr. P at all, but he would say there is a Joseph Pieper quote that is, we are not yet who we already are, because we are already the person that God has made us to be, but we have not yet grown into that person.
We're still discovering it, I
So
guess.
yes, yeah, discovering it is the perfect word to use. But
Yeah, I've only met him briefly one time while we were eating, but I'm sure I know I've seen him at the dining commons once in a while
yeah.
with you guys. I'm sure you have some insightful conversations. Um, but yeah, I that's really interesting. As far as everything you were saying, it's hard to put into words exactly, because here we go.
Yeah.
One thing I was thinking of that really came to mind for me, as far as a more biblical lens, is that, I mean, when God created animals and all these things, I feel like at least we don't know for sure, but at least from what it looks like God gave us more of like consciousness, like a free will to do things. I mean, how far we've come from the last 100 years is all due to that, our ability to improve. Like animals are in the same position that as they've always been in, and we've not, now I'm speaking to you through a laptop, and you have AirPods on that didn't exist, So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so everything like I believe like from that perspective, I believe that uh God's kind of present in our lives in that way, I would say. So yeah, so that's good. Nice to go deep with that one.
Yeah. And to that point, like human beings are special. Like you were saying, animals aren't walking around wearing AirPods and like having video conferences. Like human beings are the one to develop, the ones to do all of this stuff that's revolutionary. And like you were saying, when God created animals and he created plants and he created the earth, he then created humans to take care of it all. And so that honestly brings me to like a further topic, which like I don't get into politics because that's just not really my forte, but like even with like the environment, because that's not really political, like it's literally the world that we live in. If God created us to take care of our environment and take care of our animals, take care of our oceans and our forests, why are we destroying it now?
Hmm.
Like what's changed? Like what in the human mindset has changed if the purpose of one of the purposes of God putting us on this earth was to watch over everything he first created? Because we were not the first things that like we weren't just like floating around in space. Like God's like, okay, here you go. God created us and put us on this earth to watch over and to protect the land that he created because he felt that was fit for us to do. And so as Christians, I think the climate and the environment is something that we should pretty much focus on just because of that literal translation of Genesis. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
I that's pretty important to me. Like that's I would say the only like political thing that I would really be comfortable getting into is like the environment and maybe not so much like climate change, but climate change has to do with the environment. So it's all kind of like encapsulated in the environment. But that sorry, that just like came
Hmm.
to mind. I was like thinking as I said that.
Yeah, that's fine. That's all right. Um, hmm. Yeah, that's definitely something interesting as far as that because hmm, yeah, I guess I'll move on. I was pondering that for a lot too long if I just sit here. I was thinking of other things. Um, but yeah, something else because I was kind of just looking into some ancient thinkers. There's so many, but like I just found like a couple here and there that I thought would be interesting. Um, and this kind of reminds me of I'll just read the quote first. So Confucius said this quote. It says, "Our greatest glory is not in never failing, but in rising every time we fail." And I was kind of thinking. It kind of reminded me of what you were saying about the trials and tribulations that we all go through. God puts us through, like you said. Um, so I guess a question I could come up with from this quote right here um, is what's one moment you feel like you were most maybe you're most resilient, you were like you were striving for a goal, maybe you were failed it before, or maybe you weren't even trying for that goal, maybe you just all of a sudden you realize, wow, like this is something I want to do, or anything like that. Do you have anything in mind for that?
Mm. Like everything in my mind goes to sports and like
Hmm.
former golf matches. Um, so just because that's really like the primary focus of my life and like what I like to do. So most of my struggles and my goals that I have are golf oriented because that's that's what challenges me kind of the most, like in that moment of competition. But I remember like specifically if you want like a specific golf competition story,
Oh,
because this is
sure,
where
sure.
I just felt like, yeah. So there was a district championship golf match back in high school. I think it was my junior year, I think. Um, we were only in our second year as a high school girls golf team. Like my high school had always had a co-ed team, so like the girls and guys would play together, but the girls really didn't play a lot because there weren't that many girls who golfed. But my sophomore year, we actually had enough girls to start an all-girls team. So it was only our second season as an all-girls golf team. So we were playing these schools from out of the area that we had like never played before, and we were in this district championship match. And I was playing like, so when you like start players, you have like number one spot plays against the number one spot from another team. So like your like top golfers will play, and then the number twos will play, and the number threes will play, number fours will play, and so on. So I was playing the number one spot. So already going into that match, knowing that I'm going to be playing against the two other best golfers from the two other schools, that's a little bit of pressure in and of itself, just because you know that like you're expected to perform and you're expected to go and try and win this championship for your team. So that being said, like we go into the match, and I think so we started on the back nine of the course, because there were like so many people playing, so they had to send us off on different holes. So I started on number 10, and I played the first 9 holes at like a not very good score. So it was really difficult to like sit there and sit with that score that I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be good enough to win. I don't know if I can recover from this. But then the front 9 holes, I actually shot the best score I had ever shot on 9 holes, ever playing golf. And that score ended up getting us to that district championship. So just being in the mindset of like finishing and not giving up after you've had a bad stretch of holes, I think that was one of the moments that I felt most resilient in like what I was doing in that moment. And just being able to push through and being able to recognize that it's not over yet, and that you have more golf to play, you have more competition to get through, that it's not time to die yet, you know, like it's still very much possible to recover from that. So that was one of like specific moments that I felt most resilient in my strength, and also to support my team as well, because that was huge for them. So it wasn't just like a me thing, it was like, okay, I'm doing this for my team as well.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely rising. At least in the moment, you seemed like you were failing in the beginning, so that's awesome. Yeah. Something I got definitely. I'll share a story too.
Yeah, go for it.
Now I think of something. So it was my senior year of high school, and so it was during winter track, and this is actually my first season doing winter track because I've been doing swimming during the winter my first couple of years of high school. So I decided to really focus more on running. So I did that. And so if any runner knows listening, like indoor track is much different than outdoor track or cross country because it's running inside. Like the breathing is much more odd. It's odd. So and plus like the track itself, it could be banked, which makes you go faster or like regular. So and it's also half the size of an outdoor track. So it's only 200 meters around instead of 400 meters around. So you're basically doing double the laps. So there's a lot of
Oh
different
wow.
variables there. Yeah. So like one lap outside would be 2 laps inside. So it's very different because I remember thinking I was running a mile one time and it's 8 laps inside. I'm like, oh my gosh, it just felt like so many
Jeez.
circles. Um, so
Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
So but one to get back to my story though, basically what happened was it was the state championship, and it was a distance medley relay, which is basically composed of a person that runs the 1200 meters, then the 400, then the 800, which would be me doing the 800, and then the mile leg, which is the last leg. So I was the third leg in that, and we were seated about seventh or ninth. I remember we have to see like seventh or ninth, and I mean we all just had really good races, and we all PR'd, and we were at the point where we were maybe like 2 seconds away from actually winning the whole thing, and it was unbelievable. Like everybody was yelling,
Wow.
and it was just crazy. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, it was just like an up and down year. Like me doing indoor track for the first time, I was hitting my time sometimes, but not every time. So everybody was like hitting their time, and we were like so close to winning it, and we got the second place, which is still excellent.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking to myself, like, man, this is definitely something where coming together as like kind of what you said, like coming together as a team,
Yeah.
like relays. That's why I love relays so much, because most people run their best times in the relay, because I don't know if it's like a mental thing, but it's more so like you want your teammate either in front of you or behind you to have the best lead, or will have a great lead. So um
Yeah.
yeah, so that's something that definitely came to mind about that.
Oh, I totally feel that, especially when you say that you run better when you're running for your team, or you have better times when you're running for your team. I definitely feel that because, like I said, in like those district championship or those state championship matches, when we were playing as a team, I think I would shoot a better score than like playing individually. Like in the individual district championships, like I never won an individual district championship in high
Mm.
school. I never even medaled in individual districts. I had always played so much better in the team district championship and then not performed like individually. And I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's just feeling more individual pressure, or if it's knowing that like you don't have your teammates to kind of like lift you up and bring you back. Like I don't know what it is. It's an interesting shift in mindset that like I've spoken about in like news station interviews, because usually those competitions come right after each other. Like the team district championship will be on a Monday, and then that next Tuesday, the individual district championship will happen.
Mm.
And I could shoot a 76 one day and then in 87 or a 90 the next day. And
Mm.
I don't know what it is about that shift in mindset, but when you're playing for your team and you know that you have other bodies on the line that you got to pick up and support, some other instinct like kicks in. And I'm sure you can definitely relate to that too, with literally PRing and having like the best time of
Right.
your life when you're in a relay, you know.
Yeah,
So
and it happened again too. Like I thought, I just thought of another thing. I won't say the complete everything about it, but pretty much it was again, it was a championship of my senior year, and so this was outdoor track, so very similar circumstances indoor, but this was the inter league, so it wasn't the state, it was like inter league championship, and Eastern's head coach at the time was actually watching, so there was that too.
ooh,
He
that's
came to,
pressure.
right, so he came to watch me, and pretty much, so I was the anchor leg of a 4x800 relay, which I love. The 800, that's like one of my favorites. And the third leg's coming in, and basically it's and to be clear, we didn't really, the guys didn't have a shot at winning a whole championship like we did like the 3 years prior we won, but we didn't have a shot this time. So we knew this first event was going to be the time to shine, because this is our shot to really win it all, like here, at least this event, own this event. And I'm like holding my hand out like this, and there's my teammate. They're both elbowing in the last 100 meters. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is gonna be close.
Oh geez.
And like me and this other guy's like waiting for the handoff, and pretty much all I could say is I that race I ran, I ended up like winning it for my team. I never had a faster time in my life since then, you know. So
Yeah.
so
Jeez.
it's unbelievable how yeah, like you said, that instinct is definitely present, and I'm sure other people can relate to that do sports. I mean, just because like it's just a fun thing, because even though there's pressure, like you said, it's also you don't really put it all on yourself exactly, because it's like, all right, my teammates want me to do this too. It's not just like, oh, I need this for me, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's very fascinating. I don't know if there's any science behind like a relay thing, because that'd be something that'd be something really interesting to see what that's
It would
about.
be interesting. I mean, there has to be a study on something like that. Like that
Right.
psychologists have, and even like sports psychologists like specifically have conducted, like the difference in mindset of like team versus individual competition. Because I mean, we see like gymnastics, I was just watching in the Olympics, is the same way. Like there's the team all around final, and then there's the individual all around final. So like which like are those girls performing better for their team when they know that the medal for their country is on the line, or are they performing better when they know that it's just for their individual medal? Because didn't our US girls, didn't they win silver in the team finals, and then
Yes.
Suni Lee had won gold?
Right.
But Russia's teammates, I think they were the ones who finished with gold.
Hmm.
But none of them did particularly well in the individual finals, which is really interesting to me. Like I don't know where the difference lies. Like if it's truly skill level, or if it's just like combined score, or what it is. But
Right. And that's one of those sports where I'm so grateful that I don't do a sport where judges are I don't know how you feel, but I was
yeah,
thinking to myself, like, sometimes I'm like, man, that score should be lower or or higher. I'm like,
yeah,
goodness, because I don't know. I just love like sports. It's much more. It's defined by your time in a race or like who you beat, and there's no like controversy or anything like that. Not that there has to be controversy. In my head, there is. I'm like,
yeah,
I think it's this, but it's actually that. So, um,
yeah,
yeah, that's gosh, that's interesting. And
yeah. And it makes me thankful that like I'm not being judged, and then like that's like separate from my gratefulness for not playing a sport where a clock matters. Because if I feel like I have to perform at like a certain time, I have to like swim a race in like this amount of time, or I have to run a leg of a relay in this amount of time to win. Like I feel like I would be under so much more pressure because I have the numbers ticking down like right in front of me, you know?
mm,
So like props to people who play sports with clocks because it's stressful. And with golf, you can literally be out there for 6 hours, have a shot clock. I don't have that pressure of like, I need to perform before this minute hits on the clock, or like after like this certain time, then like that's where I'm cut off. Um, but yeah, I definitely know what you're saying. Like it would be tough to be judged, because if somebody judged me on every single swing that I took, like that's 80 some swings that you're being judged on, like
right, right,
not like maybe like
yeah.
5 or 6 moves that you're doing. Um, but yeah, I definitely relate to that as well. And props to people who play clock sports.
Yeah, and Marin, I would say this also. As far as like clock sports and things like that, I've noticed that like at least for cross country, I realized that I would never wear my watch in a race, and some people would do wear watches in races to keep track of their pace, but I would never do
Mhm.
that because mentally I would think like, oh, I'm either going too fast, too slow, and then like it would just screw with my head. So like
Yeah.
some of the best races I've had, like the best race I did have when the last time we had the season, like I know that my time was, and I just ran to run it and see how it goes. But here's the one confusing thing though is when you're running a race and then they have the clock right there, and I don't know if I want to look at
Yeah.
it, and I'm like,
Ooh.
and mentally I'm thinking like, oh, I'm going really fast, and then it's like a mental gymnastics because you're literally right here, and it's like maybe like 48 seconds to the first lap, and then here, right here, it's
Yeah.
like 55. You're like, oh, I'm actually not going as fast as I thought. So I shouldn't have slowed
Hmm.
down. And then like you kind of get a mental thing going. So um
So I guess like the best races are the ones where you're not even thinking about the clock. And so
well,
that you like eliminate that pressure right from the get-go.
I would say I can't say it's universal because I don't do races where it's like a 5K or 10K, which is like a lot more, and
Yeah.
pace is much more important. For races that I do, which is like 800, it's like 2 laps, or like about 3.5 laps, which is like the 1500. that's like much more about me being in control of my own race and like basically competing against other people. Um, and my coach would tell me like I went too hard in this in the beginning, the first 300, so I need to slow down, and I do slow down, and then I get a better time. So it just depends on what race it is, I would say.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that makes sense.
mhm. Yeah.
I mean, I can kind of relate to that, like not in like the time aspect, obviously, like I was saying, but in like the being conservative at some points of your competition. Like when just this past MAC championship, well, my first MAC championship because I was only a freshman. I knew like I think I was sitting in like sixth or fifth place um after the first day. So there's two rounds to max. So it's like the first round, the second round. And after the first round, I was like sitting in like fifth or sixth place. Or maybe it was fourth. I can't remember it, but it was like around that area. Like it was on the edge of medaling because the top five will medal in like the first team all conference.
Mm.
And I was basically like on the edge of like that first team all conference. And so I like knew that going into the second round. So when I started playing that second round, I was playing extremely well. Like I could have shot in the 70s. I ended up shooting in 80, but I could have shot in like the mid low 70s. I was just playing almost the round of my life. But then I knew I was playing well. And so in the last couple holes, I started to like kind of like coil back and like play conservative because I was then sitting in fourth place with 3 holes left, knowing that if I bogeyed out, which was not probably not what I was going to do, or maybe it was what I did do, that I would still get a medal and I would still make the first team all conference as a freshman, and which was a fairly incredible feat that people have just been telling me about. They're like, "That's crazy! You're a freshman.
Mhm.
You're already placing in the top
Yeah, for
five."
sure.
And so like going into that with like those last 3 holes left, I like just started to like hold back, and I'm like, I shouldn't have held back. Like I should have went for third, or I should have went for second. Like I could have placed second, but
Mm.
my mindset was like, do I need to like risk more than sixth place, or like do I need to really go for a second place medal when I know I have a fourth secured? Like I don't know if I was in that right mindset, like as a freshman, not really being comfortable with the course, not really knowing my limitations or like my strengths. So I definitely get that, like you could be conservative, you could be more conservative when you know that something is already like on the line for you, and like that can help. Sometimes it can help you secure something, like you're saying, like with your pacing, like that can like being conservative and being slower at first and then kind of pacing yourself and speeding up, that can help you win a race. But like it could also hurt, like in my case where it's like I'm costing myself a higher place even though I did get a medal. I could have cost myself like a second or third place medal because I kind of held
Mm.
back and like didn't know what like my limitations and my strengths were for like those last 3 holes. Like I could have finished out better. But it definitely depends on the situation, and then it just gives you a lot of growth like for your next race. Like how you were saying your coach was like, oh, this next race you've got to pace yourself more. Like if you went super fast in the first leg and then you just kind of slowed down, like that mindset kind of transfers, because now I know for next year, like keep full throttle, keep the foot on the
Mhm.
pedal, like just keep pushing because you're not going to jip yourself out of a second or first place medal now. But yeah, I can relate to that for sure with being conservative. Um,
Yeah, it's funny because I immediately thought of like when I was younger, I used to think like what's I used to think to myself, what does it really mean being like a veteran? Like, is that really important on a team? And me as old, and you're gonna learn that too as you get older and like experience more matches and games and things like that and races for me, in my case. you know a lot more than your competition is. So you'll know more than the next upcoming class. And like I didn't know that I had an elbow and assert myself at the start of a race, and if you don't do that in the beginning of the race, it doesn't matter how hard you train, because you already lost the race from that moment, especially in the 800 where it's so fast, like it's only 2 laps. It's like if you don't run a certain time in the first lap, then you can't come back from that. So I like that's why like veteran leadership and that those situations are so key. And it's so funny because I had one quote written down here, and it's like, happy is the man who has broken the chains which hurt the mind and has given up worrying once and for all. And as I was sound like, I immediately thought of like kind of like the worrying might have, and I don't want to, I'm just gonna be real, but it seemed like the worrying kind of put the chains on like how well you were doing, and I'm sure you recognize that.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So it's just interesting. But yeah, I think that's I think we had a great talk, and thank you, Marin, for coming on. I really appreciate the time you've taken to be on the show. And also,
thank you so much.
I'll say one real quick thing. People can find your articles on the Waltonion website. Is that correct? And I'll link that below.
Yes, absolutely. So there's like an author page on the Waltonion, and there's like a specific link, which is also like in my Instagram bio, that you can directly click on, and it just takes you to all of the articles that I've written. And we'll be adding more. Actually, I just accepted the position as the editor-in-chief for the newspaper, like as a whole. So like I'll be kind of transitioning from the sports editor to like the editor of the whole paper. So
congratulations.
Keep a lookout for the paper. Thank you. So just keep a lookout, read the paper. My articles will be there. It'll be fun. It'll be a fun time. I'll have the paper for the next 3 years. So hopefully you guys will keep following me and enjoy stuff I have to write. It'll mostly be about sports. So if you're into that.
Yeah. And assuming we have our seasons and everything, I'm sure you'll have a lot of material to work with too. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, have a great rest of your week, and thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.